Today, I'm going to be showing you how you can turn your boring Excel spreadsheets into interactive dashboards. This actually is a fantastic set of tools that help you really kind of set out or stand out from the crowd. So, as I get into it, smash a like button, subscribe for more, and let's get started. Okay guys, so this is going to be a slightly longer kind of video tutorial showing you how to do this, but do bear with me through every step because it does get you a very good result at the end. Okay, so here we have some really basic data dumped down. This is dummy data in our Excel, right? It's not structured at the moment, but basically what we have is we have a column for a product, we have a date, which is literally just the first of every month, the month name, the location, the amount of units sold, the cost per unit, the price including VAT per unit in the UK, the price excluding VAT, the tax that's applicable per unit, the gross sales, the net sales, and the profit driven, okay? Then we have obviously locations: London, Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool, Nottingham, London, Leeds. It kind of repeats itself through different products, which is iPhone, iPad, MacBook Pro, and MacBook Air, right? Some dummy data that I've just put together for the purpose of this video. Now, the first thing that we need to do is we need to structure our data into an Excel table. I talk about this all the time because it is such an underrated feature of Excel. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to click into our data. That has no breaks in it, by the way. Okay, we could highlight everything that we wanted to, but I'm just going to click into the data. Then I'm going to come over to the home part of the ribbon here, and where it says format as a table, I'm going to click that drop down, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it into a style that I like, which is this one right here. It's going to highlight the create a table pop-up box here. It says where is your data for your table. It's going to automatically highlight everything that is connected from where I had my cursor placed, and my header, or my tables, does in fact have headers, so I want to make sure that is ticked, and I'm going to click OK. There we go. Now our data here is transformed into a table, an Excel table that is more powerful than just dumper down of data into Excel. Now we do have the contextual tab here for the table. So once you're in the table, you'll have this contextual tab. Click out of it, it will disappear. Click into it and it reappears. We want to come over to where it says table name, and we're going to give this a name. I'm just going to call it data for the purpose of this video, but you'd give it a more meaningful name in your own scenario, okay? And I'm going to press enter on that, so we now have a data table called data inside Excel. Okay, so that's your first part of this done. Quite straightforward. We've got data, we dumped it into Excel, we transformed it into an Excel table. We're going to open up a new sheet here, okay, and in this beginning area here, we're going to insert a pivot table, okay, and we're going to grab the sales table, which I can type in here, but what I'm going to do is actually navigate over to it, and I'm going to come over to the top where you have column A and row 1, and in the top diagonal you'll get this black diagonal arrow. I'm going to click that, and it's going to load up the data table for us, okay? And you can see it right here. Like I said, you could type in data as in the range or the table that we're looking for. As you can see here, table/range. I could of course have just typed in data and it would have found it, or alternatively navigated over to it and clicked that black arrow, which will highlight and give you the data name in that box, okay? And then we want to put it into that existing sheet, which is sheet 2 A1, and I'm going to click OK. Now in here, I'm going to put this as pivot 1 as the name of the sheet. We'll hide these later. Okay, so now a pivot table. What do we want for our first piece of data that we're going to analyze? Well, we probably want to take a look at the products. So I'm going to grab product and I'm going to put that into our rows. I'm going to then go ahead and find the number of sales units and put that over into this first area here, okay, into the values area. And that's sum of all of the units sold by the products. Now, I'm not doing any additional filtering into this little area here for the first pivot table, okay? And one of the reasons that we have our data in an Excel table is that if we come down to the bottom and we want to add more data, we can just add it here, which will automatically now be included in the pivot tables, okay? So that's why we do that. So the pivot table for the first one is done. We're going to create multiple pivot tables, and I'm going to put them across the top here, analyzing different pieces of information. Okay, so we're going to insert, I'm going to go pivot table, and I can type in data and just click OK, and that's going to now load up all of that data again. This time I'm going to want the product but this time I'm going to want the gross sales. Okay, and we're going to put those in there. Again, we're going to create a new pivot table. Okay, again, it's data as our name, and it's capital D, otherwise it won't find it. Data, and then we're going to go product, and we're going to go with net sales. Okay, and one more time, we're going to do the same thing again. Insert, pivot table, type in the name of our table, or navigate to it, and we're going to grab products, and we're going to grab the profit. Okay, so far we have the number of units sold in a pivot table, the gross sales in a pivot table, and the net sales in a pivot table, and the profit in a pivot table. Now we can, of course, do this with one pivot table and have a column for each, which is an option. So if I were to show you that, I could delete all of those, come over to my initial pivot table here. We can go ahead and bring in the gross sales, the net sales, and the profit all into this one pivot table here. Okay, that does work this way. Sometimes I find it easier to have separate pivot tables. Now, on that note, if you go over to pivot table analyze at the top here, we can give this a name. So I'm just going to say this is product underscore, because you can't have spaces, underscore sales. Okay, and now we know what that is. Okay, press enter. That's our pivot table. Now, within our pivot table, and with it being selected, we can navigate over to the Insert tab. And this time what we can do is we can actually insert a pivot chart. Okay, and you can find that right here. If we give that a click, it's going to give us some options. Okay, now I like the idea of some bar charts here, so I think we're going to go with that. There's lots of different designs to go with. Here, I think we are going to go with the standard one like this one here for now. We'll customize it later. We're going to click OK. Now we have this here, and of course within our chart, we can now, this visual, we can now have 3 different or 4 different charts to depict this information differently. So for example, we can now turn off the profit, the net sales, and the gross sales for this one, and we end up with this. Or alternatively, we can have it all listed out, right? But the problem with it having listed like this is it doesn't give us a great kind of view for our charts, which is what we want. And these things are linked together. So what we're going to do is we're going to undo all of the things that we've just done so that we can do it correctly. Which was to have all of these split out differently so that we can graph them. So the first one over here, which is units sold, so what we're going to do is we're going to go insert, we're going to go to pivot chart, we're going to choose that one there, we're going to OK it, that's your first one. Then we're going to go to the second pivot table, we're going to go to insert, we're going to go to pivot chart, and we're going to choose the next one. Okay, and I'm going to repeat this process for each of these pivot tables that we created. And the reason that I'm doing it this way is it allows me to have multiple visuals for our dashboard later. Okay, so we're going to insert, we're going to go pivot table, and we're going to click OK. So now we have pivot tables for each of those different elements, right? We have the units sold, we have the gross sales, the net sales, and the profit. Okay, so that's our first pivot table structure done. Okay, we're going to create a new tab down here. We're going to call this one pivot 2. Okay, pivot 2. And again, same concept, we're going to insert a pivot table. It's going to be from our data table that we created earlier. Okay, and this time we don't want the product. What we're going to want is the location. So we're going to bring location in. Okay, and this time, again, we've got different things that we could do here. We don't necessarily need the unit sold, but I'm going to go through the same process that we just did before, which is going to be looking at it like this. Okay, so we're going to create all of those pivot tables again. This time we're going to focus on location and sales. Okay, so we're going to go location into here, we're going to go into gross sales over this side, and then add another pivot table. And we can, of course, copy and paste the pivot tables, by the way, as well. Also works quite well. And then we're going to, so we want gross, we need net. And if, for example, I were to copy this, paste it over here, I can come into this and then just change it to profit. So that you can see there's quicker ways to do things as well. Again, what we're going to do is we're going to click into each of these. We're going to go insert the pivot chart, and we're going to chart those out as well. Okay, we're going to customize these later. Insert pivot chart. This one is going to be that. Bring that in for those. Again, we're going to do the same thing. A little bit repetitive, I know, but once these things are set up, we can get onto the fun part, which is the design elements when it comes to our pivot charts. Okay, so We now have a total of 8 pivot charts spanning from the products perspective and the location perspective. Okay, and we don't necessarily need all of these, but they are quite interesting things to kind of have. Okay, now with all of those kind of done, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else from our data that we might want a visual for at a later date. Ultimately, we've got the months, we've got the products, we've got the locations, we've got the units sold, etc. So the next thing we want to do is actually come on over and include a slicer. So if we come over into this first one over here, which is basically your iPhone area, what we can do is we can go to Analyze or Pivot Table Analyze and insert a slicer. Okay, and our slicer is going to be the month, and we're going to click OK. Now we have a slicer that allows us to basically adjust the kind of sales to a specific month. Okay, again, this makes it look quite interesting. Okay, so we can adjust and see how things kind of look across the board there. Okay, so that's our slicer. Okay, that's the first slicer that we need. And in fact, that's pretty much the only slicer I'm really going to need for this example, because this slicer can also be applied to all of these other charts as well. I'm just wondering to myself as we kind of put this video together, is do I want anything else? Could probably do something by location, but again, the month is going to do that for us in this example, but we could have multiple slices if we wanted to show different pieces of information. But I don't think it's really relevant for this example, because actually this example is really quite simple and quite basic. So let's go ahead and add a new sheet. We'll pull it to the very front, and we're going to call this dashboard, like so. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to basically select, using the Shift key, all of our visuals and our slicer from our first page, Control X to basically cut them, and we're going to paste them onto this first page. We're going to come over to our second pivot table structure, and we're going to go ahead and cut those, and we're going to bring those over here as well and paste them in. Okay, so now we have, basically 8 visuals on a sheet here and 1 filter. So let's go ahead and start addressing how this kind of look and feel goes across our dashboard here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave this roughly around there on the left hand side. That's our slicer. At the moment, it's only affecting this one visual. Now if I right click here and I go down to slicer settings, I believe I can go ahead and turn off the header because we don't need that. We'll go ahead and OK that one. If I right click on the slicer again, this time we want report connections, and here you can see all of the pivot tables that our slicer is connected to. Okay, we have 8 different tables, 8 different visuals, but it's only affecting the very first one. So what we want to do is we want to basically go ahead and select all of those on our slicer, click OK. Now, as I change the slicer settings, it affects all of the charts that we see. Perfect. Okay, now let's just go ahead and put these roughly where we want them to be. Okay, this is going to be a little bit fiddly depending on kind of how you want to do it, and obviously making sure that they are the size that you want them to be. We can also adjust the size of our slicer here so that we get all of those months in there, like so. That way it makes it a little bit easier for people to kind of select what they want, like so. And yeah, we can now just need to adjust things to make things look how we want. I'm just going to say that's location. These are products. So I wondered to myself as I kind of pulled this together, whether or not we want to have all of these visuals the way that they are depicted here, or whether we want to kind of change things out just a little bit, because we don't have to have everything as a bar. If that kind of means a little bit boring, so maybe what we should do is actually reflect on the sales slightly differently, right? So maybe what we'll do is we will actually get rid of maybe the gross, because the gross is a nice to know but not necessarily required. If I remove the gross one from here, and we have units sold, and we bring across here the net sales and the profit from here, then we can see on a view straight away, you know, the locations, the gross, which we don't want anymore, the net sales, and of course the profit. Now we can mix and match this, we can change these up, and we can change how they look and all of that kind of good stuff. The next thing that I'm thinking about is inserting some logos and things like that at the top. We can obviously select all of the space that we see here as well and change this to suit our kind of preferences. Let's just go ahead and make that white for now. I'm going to come into our first table here, and I'm going to remove our fields from the right hand side so we can see everything. I'm going to select this first pivot table. Okay, this is units sold, which we can see here. If I go to the design, you can see that we have lots of different options here. I personally tend to like to see things like this, kind of like a grayed out kind of view, and it's probably the style that I'm going to go ahead and apply to all of our charts here to kind of give it a little bit more kind of a better kind of look and feel, I guess, so that we can kind of see things a little bit clearer. It makes it kind of pop a little bit, right? I like the blue. It's kind of on brand to a point as well, so I don't mind that. Now the other thing that's in here is if we come over to our quick layouts, we can change how things actually appear. And we can do this manually as well if we want, but here you have the ability to just do some quick layout changes to kind of what looks better for you and all that kind of good stuff. Now for the most part, I don't need to worry terribly too much about it. I don't mind what it looks like here, but you can of course go through all of these options and change them as needed. Now the totals, of course, we can remove the titles if we want. We can of course adjust these however we see fit. We could put in here that this is units sold. So I can type that in, for example, units sold. I can come over to this one here, which could be net sales as an example, like so. This one over here can be profit. Okay, and we could repeat this process down this side, but again, I don't think we necessarily need to do so, because what I could do is remove these because we've got the titles above and the columns kind of represent, right? So units sold and net sales, and of course profit, right? Those are columns. Now in that kind of instance, what we could do is adjust our background, and we could even put a BIM image in the background if we wanted to kind of separate columns as well. Now what I'm going to do here, I think, is adjust the column widths and then basically look to try and make the charts the right size of the columns. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 columns. I'm going to right click on those and I'm going to go column width. I'm going to make them, looking at this size of this, I'm going to make them 9 and I'm going to click OK. Okay, now what I can do is I can select these two charts and I can move them in line with the K, or where the K ends, just over here. Okay, like so. Then with column L, what I can do is I can select column L, column width. I'm going to make this 5 and click OK. And then what I'm going to do is select another 5 columns, 7 columns, wasn't it? So we went 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to select 7 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Right click, column width, make that 9, click OK. Select these two and move them over to the other side of L, like so. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take column T, we're going to resize that one to being 5. We're going to click OK. Then we're going to grab our two charts. We're going to line them up to where T ends and U starts. We're going to go 7 columns across here. A little bit fiddly, I guess, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We're going to right click. We're going to column width that to 9, and we're going to click OK. And now we have our charts kind of spaced out a little bit more evenly, and you can be more specific and precise about this as you kind of want to. But for me, that I'm just going to eyeball it. I don't have to be too fiddly. I want to kind of keep the tutorial relatively quick, right? Now, if I go ahead and highlight just these cells here, and I'm going to select those ones there, I can now go ahead and choose some more colors, and we can just kind of try and find a color that might kind of make it kind of stand out just a little bit, but slightly different from kind of what we see before. I'm just going to take that and move it over a little bit there as well. So now we have a kind of clear divide between these on the chart. We can also see that we have our filters here as well. Okay, so for the most part, that is, and I actually can go ahead and just select all of that just for continuity. I might just do something like that. There we go. And we can mess around with this. We can, of course, adjust things, make things look as we kind of want them to. Again, we can go ahead and just add in, a bit more kind of color and texture to things and kind of dress up the kind of look and feel of the dashboard as we kind of see fit. And the idea here is quite simple. We can now go ahead and look by month at the units sold by location and by product, the net sales by month, by location and by product. The same with the profit, right? Now this of course is a really basic example. It kind of shows you briefly how to do this, to create these dashboards. And of course, if you want to add additional data, all you have to do is add the data to the bottom of your data table and then refresh the pivot charts and your pivot tables, right? Now you can do that quite simply by clicking one of these charts, going over to the pivot chart analyze and just clicking the refresh button. That is it. You can of course take that a step further and create a macro for it, create a little button on here for refresh if you want to, but this is a no VBA kind of approach to creating these dashboards. Again, we can do lots of different things. We can dress this up however we see fit, put in your own branding, all the kind of good stuff that you would expect to see from a good solid dashboard without going too heavy into something like, Power BI, which would be my personal preferred method when it comes to creating these dashboards. But if you're looking for an Excel solution without any of the complications, then this is how you would basically go ahead and do it. Create pivot tables. From the pivot tables, you can create pivot charts. And from the pivot tables, create slicers. The slicers can then be right-clicked, and you can connect to other pivot tables using the same data sources. This means that your pivot slicer can affect multiple pivot tables, multiple pivot charts, all with a single click. So we can change to May, we can change to June. In these examples, we could have a slicer, an additional slicer for year if we wanted to. I only have 1 year's worth of data here. We have slicers that if we wanted to could be products. We could have slicers for locations. All of those options are available directly inside Excel, and it becomes a very quick and easy way to create a dashboard in Excel. Okay guys, hopefully this has been useful and informative, and maybe you can start creating your own Excel dashboards after watching this video. So if it has worked for you, smash the like button, subscribe for more, and I'll catch you all in the next one.